On a night meant for love and celebration, a woman walks into a restaurant expecting to surprise the man she built a life with. Instead, she finds him seated intimately with someone she trusts most. Betrayal stings, but she doesn't break. She watches. She waits. They think they've won, that their deception will go unnoticed. But what they don't realize is that she's already planning her next move. The restaurant was bathed in golden light, casting a warm glow over the crystal-clear wine glasses and polished silverware. Soft piano music floated through the air, mingling with the murmur of hushed conversations and gentle laughter. Couples sat across from each other, exchanging loving glances, hands intertwined over candle-lit tables. The scent of expensive perfumes and gourmet dishes created an atmosphere of elegance and indulgence. In a secluded corner by the window, Lucy sat alone, a vision of quiet sophistication in a deep burgundy evening gown that hugged her figure perfectly. The delicate diamond earrings she wore sparkled under the light, subtle yet undeniably striking. In front of her was a carefully wrapped silver box, a gift she had spent months planning, a limited edition watch she knew Daniel would love. She glanced at the time, a small smile touching her lips. Any minute now her husband would walk through that door, looking slightly flustered, but endearingly apologetic for being a few minutes late. He would press a kiss to her temple, pull out the chair opposite hers, and together they would toast to another year of marriage. Tonight was special. She had planned every detail, choosing this restaurant because it held memories of their first anniversary. It had been too long since they had spent a quiet evening together, just the two of them. The past year had been overwhelming, with business demands pulling her in different directions. She knew Daniel had also been busy, but lately he had been distant, texting less, canceling plans at the last minute, offering vague excuses about work. A flicker of doubt passed through her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. Relationships had ups and downs. Maybe he was just stressed. Maybe, like her, he needed tonight to remember what they had built together. She lifted her glass, swirling the deep red wine, allowing its rich aroma to fill her senses. A slow, steady breath. Tonight would be perfect. Then the restaurant door swung open. A gust of cold air slipped through the entrance, making the candle flames flicker. Lucy looked up, expecting to see Daniel rushing in with that familiar sheepish grin. Instead, she saw him, walking in at an unhurried pace, his posture relaxed, his hand resting lightly on the waist of another woman. Hannah. Lucy's stomach dropped. Her best friend. The woman she had shared secrets with, laughed with, trusted without hesitation. Hannah was radiant, her golden waves cascading over her shoulders, her fitted dress emphasizing curves that Lucy suddenly realized had been flaunted more frequently in Daniel's presence. The two of them stepped into the restaurant with an air of intimacy that went far beyond friendship. Daniel leaned in slightly, his fingers brushing Hannah's back as he whispered something in her ear. She laughed softly, tipping her face up toward him in a way that sent a piercing ache straight through Lucy's chest. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, but her expression remained calm, unreadable. A waiter greeted them, leading them to a table, not far from where Lucy sat. She could see them clearly. Too clearly. Daniel helped Hannah out of her coat, his touch lingering just a second too long. His eyes, once filled with devotion when they looked at Lucy, now held something softer, something dangerously close to love, as they gazed at Hannah. Hannah beamed, her expression glowing with the kind of happiness Lucy had always assumed was reserved for herself. But now it was being shared, stolen, by the two people she had once held closest. A sharp, cold realization crept up her spine. She had been living in the dark. Lucy exhaled slowly, setting down her wine glass with calculated ease. Her heart was pounding, but outwardly she was as composed as ever. Hannah and Daniel spoke in hushed tones, their conversation full of secret smiles and stolen glances. They weren't worried about being caught. They weren't worried about her. A slow burn ignited in Lucy's chest, not just from betrayal but from their audacity. She reached for her phone, her fingers moving instinctively toward Daniel's number, but just as she was about to press call, his voice carried across the room. "She has no idea," he said, his tone casual, amused. "After tonight, it's over." The words sliced through Lucy, sharp and merciless. Her body went rigid, the impact of his betrayal hitting her harder than she had prepared for. It wasn't just an affair. It was a planned execution of their marriage, a calculated decision to discard her like an afterthought. For a moment, she thought she might break, might stand up, march over and throw her glass of wine in his face, might demand answers, scream, cry, anything to release the fire now raging inside her. But she didn't. Instead, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that barely reached her eyes. If they thought she was weak, that she would crumble at the sight of them together, they had grossly underestimated her. They had played their game well. But now it was her turn. Lucy had spent years building her empire, transforming a single boutique spa into a prestigious chain that catered to the elite. She had cultivated a reputation as a sharp, astute businesswoman, someone who commanded respect in the world of luxury beauty. Her name was synonymous with excellence, her spas offering unparalleled service, and clients were willing to pay a premium just to be associated with her brand. She was ambitious, independent, and fiercely dedicated to her work. Daniel, on the other hand, had once harbored big dreams of making a name for himself in the business world. But after years of failing to achieve anything significant, he had settled into a different role, husband to a successful woman. When they got married, Lucy offered him a position in her company, a gesture of love and trust, a way for them to build something together. He accepted, and over time the lines between his ambition and her success blurred. Lucy's company was primarily staffed by women. From her executive team to her spa technicians, the environment was one where Daniel stood out, not just as the co-owner, but as the only man in a sea of polished, confident women. Lucy had never been the jealous type, but she wasn't blind to reality. She understood that proximity bred temptation. She had always trusted Daniel, but she wasn't naive enough to think that trust alone was a shield against betrayal. Still, if there was anyone she believed she never had to worry about, it was Hannah. Hannah had been her best friend for years. They had navigated life's ups and downs together, celebrated triumphs, and nursed wounds over countless bottles of wine. Hannah had always been there, her confidant, her unwavering support. If there was one person in the world who would never betray her, it was Hannah. And yet there was something unsettling about the way Daniel had been acting lately. At first, Lucy chalked it up to stress. He had become increasingly withdrawn, spending more time at the office, coming home later than usual. When she asked, he always had an excuse: endless meetings, supplier issues, expansion plans. He reassured her that everything was fine. But then there were the small things, the way he seemed to avoid her gaze, the way his phone was always face down on the table, the way he seemed to linger a little too long in conversations with Hannah. It was subtle, but Lucy had built her career on noticing subtleties. Her instincts whispered that something was off. Rather than let paranoia consume her, she decided to test her theory. One evening, over a casual dinner with Hannah, Lucy steered the conversation toward relationships, pretending to be amused by the idea of workplace temptation. She laughed, feigning curiosity, as she asked Hannah whether she thought Daniel ever felt attracted to any of the women at work. Hannah barely hesitated. "No way," she said with a warm smile, reaching for her wine. "Daniel absolutely adores you. I've seen the way he looks at you. He's completely devoted. You have nothing to worry about, Luce." It was the perfect answer. Too perfect. And for the first time, Lucy saw it. The faintest flicker of something in Hannah's expression. It wasn't guilt, but it wasn't sincerity either. It was the careful, measured response of someone who had rehearsed their lines. A plan began to take shape in Lucy's mind. If Daniel was truly faithful, she had nothing to fear. But if her instincts were right, then it was time to uncover the truth. She suggested something she never thought she'd do. An innocent little game. Hannah would flirt with Daniel just subtly enough to see how he reacted. A playful test, nothing serious, just a way for Lucy to put her nagging doubts to rest. Hannah hesitated for half a second before agreeing. "Of course, but you'll see he won't even notice." Lucy smiled. "Let's find out." At first, it was just harmless banter. Hannah started stopping by Daniel's office more often, asking for his help with minor tasks. She sent casual texts, nothing inappropriate, just friendly little check-ins. She laughed at his jokes a bit too enthusiastically, found small excuses to brush her hand against his. Lucy watched carefully, but for the first few days Daniel seemed oblivious. Then something shifted. He started responding. Not all at once, but little by little he leaned into the attention. His smiles lasted a little longer. He started texting back faster. One evening he came home late, distracted, his phone clutched in his hand as if it held a secret. Lucy noticed the change immediately. He began guarding his phone as if it contained state secrets. His schedule became unpredictable. Late nights at the office, last-minute business meetings, vague explanations. One evening, Lucy entered their bedroom to find Daniel texting someone. The moment he saw her, he locked the screen and set the phone aside, offering a tight-lipped smile. "What was that?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "Nothing important," he said too quickly. "Just work." He kissed her cheek and excused himself to take a shower. Lucy didn't touch his phone. She didn't need to. The way he had reacted told her everything she needed to know. Daniel was slipping. The man who once swore that she was the love of his life was now treading dangerous waters, responding to the lure of something or someone new. And Hannah? Hannah had started to change too. The texts became more frequent. The way she looked at Daniel wasn't the same as before. The way Daniel looked at her wasn't either. Lucy had set a trap. And now it was clear. Her husband had taken the bait. Hannah had never intended for this to go beyond a game. At first it was just playful, an act, a harmless little charade meant to test Daniel's fidelity. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. The teasing glances, the light touches, the whispered conversations that were meant to be calculated and controlled slowly began to feel real. And the worst part? She liked it. Daniel was different around her. Unlike with Lucy, where he was often overshadowed by her success, with Hannah he was the center of attention. She made him feel important, desired, admired. She laughed at his jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. She asked for his opinions on things she could have figured out herself just to hear him talk. She fed his ego in a way Lucy never did. And Daniel? He basked in it. He started responding in ways that were subtle at first. A lingering look, a casual compliment that held too much meaning, a text sent a little too late at night. Then the boundaries began to dissolve altogether. He no longer kept his distance from Hannah. Instead, he leaned into her presence as if drawn to her. He thrived in the way she made him feel, like a man of power, like someone who was admired, needed, wanted. It was intoxicating, and Hannah, despite her initial intentions, found herself falling. Lucy, however, was no fool. She had spent years reading people, clients, competitors, business partners. She knew how to recognize a shift in behavior, how to spot inconsistencies, and now she saw them in her own husband. Daniel, once indifferent to fashion, suddenly cared about his appearance. He updated his wardrobe, swapping his usual outfits for tailored suits and sleek, fitted shirts. He wore a new cologne, one she had never smelled on him before, one that wasn't chosen by her. He had started staying out later, claiming he was swamped with work, that expansion plans were keeping him at the office. But Lucy knew better. She knew his schedule, his responsibilities. There was no sudden influx of work. The only thing that had changed was Daniel and Hannah. She still played the role of the devoted best friend, still laughed at Lucy's jokes, still met her for lunch, still asked about her life with concern that seemed genuine. But something had shifted. Lucy saw it in the way Hannah's eyes lingered a second too long when Daniel entered a room, in the way her voice softened around him. And Daniel, despite his weak attempts at discretion, was just as obvious. One evening, Lucy arrived at the office later than usual. A long meeting had kept her occupied, and as she walked through the dimly lit corridors, she noticed how eerily quiet the building was. Most employees had already gone home, leaving only a few lingering lights flickering through the glass-walled offices. That was when she heard them. A hushed voice, a laugh that was too soft, too intimate. She stepped closer, heart pounding in her chest. Through the half-open blinds, she saw them. Daniel and Hannah sat together in his office, the lighting dim, the air between them charged with something unspoken yet undeniable. Then it happened. Daniel reached out, brushing a stray lock of Hannah's hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled. And then, ever so gently, she placed a hand on his arm as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Lucy felt as though the air had been stolen from her lungs. She could have stormed in, could have demanded answers, thrown accusations, shattered the fragile illusion they thought they were maintaining. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped back, silent, observing, calculating. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. If they thought they were being careful, they were wrong. If they thought she was oblivious, they were fools. But she wouldn't expose them now. No, she would wait. She would let them build their little castle of lies, let them become comfortable in their deception. And when the time was right, she would be the one to burn it all down. Lucy had always been observant. It was one of the reasons she had built her business empire from the ground up, her ability to read people, to notice the smallest shifts in behavior. And right now, all of Daniel's actions screamed that he was hiding something. The transformation had been gradual but undeniable. Daniel, who had always been practical when it came to his appearance, suddenly started paying more attention to his looks. His wardrobe changed. No more basic button-ups or casual blazers. Now it was custom-tailored suits, sleek dress shoes, and silk ties. He wore cologne she had never smelled on him before, something bold, something unfamiliar. He had even started going to the gym regularly, despite years of insisting he was too busy for workouts. At first, Lucy had told herself not to jump to conclusions. People evolved, after all. Maybe he was simply taking better care of himself. Maybe work really was demanding more of his time. But then, the patterns became impossible to ignore. He worked late almost every night. Business trips, ones that had never existed before, were suddenly urgent. Their quiet dinners together, the ones that had once been a ritual, became a rarity. Whenever she asked, he always had an excuse, a vague smile, a pat on the shoulder before walking away. Lucy didn't confront him, not yet. She wasn't ready to play her hand. Not when she didn't know just how deep his betrayal ran. Then there was Hannah. Hannah, her best friend. Hannah, the woman she had trusted with her secrets, her fears, her victories. The woman who still smiled at her the same way, still laughed at their inside jokes, still sat across from her at lunch, pretending nothing had changed. She was flawless in her performance, always sympathetic, always quick to dismiss Lucy's concerns whenever she mentioned Daniel's behavior. "You're overthinking," Hannah had said one evening, sipping on her wine. "Daniel adores you, Lucy. Not every change means something bad. Maybe he just wants to impress you again." Lucy studied her carefully that night, noting the way Hannah's fingers curled around the stem of her glass, the way she held Lucy's gaze just a little too long, as if daring her to question further. It was a convincing act. But Lucy wasn't convinced. She had started paying attention during the rare times they were all together. The fleeting glances, the stolen touches that Hannah probably thought were too small to be noticed. The way Daniel's eyes softened when he looked at her, a look he hadn't given Lucy in months. Something was happening, and they thought she was blind to it. Fine, let them believe that. Lucy knew one thing. People were most careless when they thought they were safe. If she wanted to uncover the full extent of their betrayal, she had to let them think they had already won. She stopped questioning Daniel about his late nights. She didn't ask where he was going when he left earlier than usual. She made no remarks about the way Hannah lingered near him, the way their conversations seemed just a little too private. Instead, she smiled more. She praised her husband in front of Hannah, making casual remarks about how much she loved him, how grateful she was for their marriage. She watched as Hannah swallowed down her reactions, as the tension in her eyes flickered for the briefest of moments before she forced a smile. Lucy gave them room, and they walked right into it. But before she turned her attention fully on Daniel, she needed to confirm one thing. How far was Hannah willing to go? So, she set a trap. One morning over coffee in her office, Lucy casually mentioned that she was considering expanding her business into another city. "I need someone I can trust to oversee everything," she said, watching Hannah's expression carefully. "It would mean a big step up for whoever I choose, more responsibility, more power. Hannah's reaction was immediate but not excitement. Instead, she hesitated. Then, ever so subtly, she asked, "Would that mean you'd be spending less time at the headquarters?" Lucy took a slow sip of her coffee, masking her amusement. Hannah wasn't interested in building anything. She was interested in what Lucy would be leaving behind. Later that evening, Lucy reviewed the details with a trusted employee, a woman who had been with her company for years, someone she knew she could trust. She asked her to keep an eye on Hannah, to take note of any unusual behavior, any signs that she was making moves behind the scenes. Days passed, and Lucy gathered enough to confirm what she had suspected all along. Hannah wasn't just sleeping with Daniel, she was waiting for the moment Lucy would step aside so she could take everything. Poor thing. She had no idea that Lucy had no intention of stepping aside. Let the game begin. Lucy had never been the type to act on impulse. Her success was built on precision, on careful planning, on knowing when to strike and when to wait. So when the truth about Daniel and Hannah unraveled before her, she didn't lash out. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't demand answers. Instead, she sharpened her focus. They thought they were untouchable. They thought she was blind. They were wrong. The first step was gathering proof. If she wanted to end this game on her terms, she needed undeniable evidence, something they couldn't talk their way out of. So she reached out to a private investigator, someone discreet, someone ruthless in their pursuit of the truth. "Follow them," she instructed. "I want times, places, conversations. I want every secret they think they're keeping." Meanwhile, she played her part flawlessly. She was still the loving wife, still the doting best friend. She smiled when Hannah made her usual excuses. She kissed Daniel on the cheek when he mumbled about working late. She didn't change her routine, didn't let on that she knew every step they took was already under surveillance. And then, the first cracks began to appear. The investigators' reports trickled in. Daniel and Hannah had moved their rendezvous beyond the office walls, careful to meet in places where they thought no one would recognize them. Cozy wine bars tucked away in dimly lit corners of the city, private dining rooms where hands could graze over candlelight, hurried motel visits where they probably convinced themselves it wasn't as shameful if no one saw them walk in together. Lucy didn't react. She waited. Then one night, while Daniel lay next to her, his breathing deep in sleep, she picked up his phone. It was almost too easy. He had always been careless, always assumed she wouldn't look. His passcode hadn't changed, and with a swipe, she was inside. What she found was worse than she imagined. Messages, hundreds of them. She scrolled, her heart hammering against her ribs, her fingers tightening around the device. "I miss you all day. I wish we didn't have to sneak around. She has no idea. She still thinks I'm the perfect husband." Her breath hitched, but she didn't stop. She copied every text, sending them to her private email. Evidence. She needed evidence. Then she saw it. The confirmation that Daniel wasn't just betraying her, but plotting against her. "Give it a little more time," he had texted Hannah. "She's planning to expand. If we play this right, I can walk away with a huge payout." Lucy's stomach clenched, but she remained still. Even in the darkness, even as the realization settled in, she refused to fall apart. He wasn't just cheating. He was waiting to gut her financially before leaving. Fine. Let him think he still had the upper hand. A perfect opportunity presented itself when a group of friends suggested a weekend retreat, a getaway filled with luxury, relaxation, and indulgence. The kind of trip where couples disappeared into private villas, where stolen moments were easier to take. Lucy played her role well. "We should all go," she told Hannah, smiling as if she wasn't fully aware of the woman's treachery. "It'll be nice to unwind." Hannah hesitated for a fraction of a second before agreeing. "That sounds amazing." "Of course," she agreed. A perfect excuse to be around Daniel without suspicion. The weekend arrived, and Lucy watched as they danced around each other, thinking they were subtle, thinking no one could see the stolen glances, the careful touches. She had prepared for this. Inside their villa, she discreetly placed a small hidden camera in the bedroom, not for Daniel, but for proof of what would happen the moment she left the room. And they didn't disappoint. After the trip, back at home, She played the footage. There he was, Daniel, slipping out of their bedroom in the middle of the night. Moments later, he entered Hannah's room. The recording caught them speaking in hushed tones, their voices low but clear. "Are you sure you'll go through with it?" Hannah asked, her tone laced with impatience. "I don't want to be your secret forever." "Just wait," Daniel responded. "She's about to expand the business. If I move at the right time, I'll get a big payout when we divorce." Lucy's hand curled into a fist, nails digging into her palm as she listened. So that was his plan. He was waiting for the right moment to betray her fully, to leave her with nothing while he and Hannah walked away with the rewards. She could have broken down, could have let the pain consume her, but no. Instead, she smiled. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. Lucy had always been a planner. She built her empire through careful calculations, sharp instincts, and an unshakable sense of control. So, when she uncovered the full extent of Daniel and Hannah's betrayal, she didn't crumble. She didn't lash out. She did what she had always done best. She strategized. The first rule of warfare was to never let the enemy know you were onto them. If Daniel and Hannah thought she was blind, she would let them continue believing that. She smiled at Daniel as if he was still her devoted husband. She laughed with Hannah over coffee, pretending nothing had changed. She played the role of the trusting wife and the oblivious best friend, all while setting the pieces of her revenge in motion. She knew them now, knew how they thought, how they operated, and she knew exactly how to make them destroy themselves. The first step was securing her assets. Late at night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, she met with her legal team, carefully shifting every financial and business interest she had. Her company's ownership was restructured, her stocks moved into untouchable accounts, her properties and wealth legally safeguarded under a new entity. Daniel thought he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What he didn't know was that the moment he did, he would find nothing left to take. Lucy even added an extra layer of protection, one that would ensure Daniel's greed would be his downfall. If he attempted to make any legal claims to her fortune during a divorce, an automatic audit would be triggered on all his financial dealings. And with everything she had learned about his underhanded business practices, she knew he wouldn't survive that scrutiny. He thought he was playing her, but he was already trapped. Then she dangled the ultimate temptation. Lucy had been planning a major business expansion, and she made sure Daniel knew about it. She spoke about it over dinner in passing conversations, letting the excitement slip into her voice at just the right moments. "I want you to be more involved," she told him one evening, her tone warm, affectionate. "I trust you with this, Daniel. I think it's time you take on more responsibility in the company." She could see the flicker of greed in his eyes. He tried to act casual, but she knew the idea of having control over the business, over the wealth, was all he had ever wanted. So she set the trap. A business deal. A massive contract that would open doors to new markets. And she handed it directly to Daniel, giving him the authority to oversee it. Of course, the contract wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Hidden within the fine print was a clause that ensured if any fraudulent activity took place under Daniel's supervision, he alone would bear the legal consequences. If he made even the slightest mistake, he would be ruined. Lucy played her role flawlessly. She encouraged him, trusted him, made him feel important. And just as she expected, he took the bait without hesitation. But her revenge wasn't just about Daniel. Hannah needed to be taken down too. So Lucy pulled her closer, pretending to confide in her more than ever before. She invited Hannah on shopping trips, planned spa days, shared secrets that weren't really secrets at all. Just well-placed lies designed to make Hannah lower her guard. And Hannah fell for it. She truly believed Lucy suspected nothing. She laughed and reassured Lucy every time she expressed doubts about Daniel's faithfulness, insisting he was the most loyal husband, and that Lucy was lucky to have him. How ironic. One afternoon, as they lounged in plush robes at a high-end spa, Lucy sighed, feigning exhaustion. "I think I'm getting tired of running the company by myself," she mused. "Maybe it's time to let Daniel take over more. I could use a break." Hannah's reaction was immediate. She tried to hide her excitement, but Lucy saw the slight gleam in her eyes, the way her fingers twitched ever so slightly against the glass of champagne she was holding. Hannah thought she was winning. She thought Lucy was stepping aside, leaving the path clear for her and Daniel to take everything. It was almost too easy. Lucy had now set every piece of the puzzle in place. Her fortune was untouchable. The contract was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode in Daniel's hands. Hannah was growing more and more comfortable, believing that her victory was near. All Lucy had to do was wait, and when the moment was right, she would destroy them both. Daniel and Hannah had grown reckless. At first, they had been careful. Furtive glances, coded messages, secret meetings in obscure places. But now, with Lucy showing no signs of suspicion, they no longer felt the need to be cautious. The thrill of deception had turned into sheer arrogance. Daniel no longer hesitated to text Hannah, even while he was at home. Sometimes he would smirk at his phone, responding quickly before locking the screen. Other times he would step away under the guise of a work call when Lucy was just in the next room. He thought she wouldn't notice. Hannah, emboldened by Lucy's apparent cluelessness, had become even bolder. She believed their affair had been perfectly concealed, that they had outmaneuvered Lucy entirely. The more Lucy pretended to be oblivious, the more confident Hannah became. But Lucy knew. She knew every word they whispered, every lie they told, every secret they thought was hidden. And she was simply waiting. Hannah, however, was growing impatient. She no longer wanted to be the mistress, the woman lurking in the shadows. She wanted it all: Daniel, the money, the status. She had spent months playing the game carefully, but now she wanted results. One evening, as she and Daniel sat in a dimly lit bar, she leaned closer, her tone low and persuasive. "You deserve more than this," she murmured, tracing the rim of her wine glass. "Lucy treats you like a business partner, not a husband. She doesn't appreciate you." Daniel exhaled heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not that simple, Hannah." "Isn't it?" she pressed. "You've been miserable for months. She has more money than she'll ever need. If you divorce her, you'll get a settlement big enough to start over. With me." Daniel hesitated. Hannah leaned in, her fingers brushing against his wrist. "We could finally be together without sneaking around. No more hiding, no more secrets. Don't you want that?" Her words slithered into his mind like a slow-acting poison. Daniel had never liked feeling like second best. Being married to Lucy had often made him feel that way, like an accessory to her success, rather than an equal partner. Hannah, on the other hand, made him feel like a king. She looked at him with admiration, praised him endlessly, made him believe he was worth more than just being Lucy's husband. And she was right. Lucy did have more money than she could ever spend. If he played this right, he could leave the marriage with financial security, a fresh start, and Hannah by his side. It was time. That evening, Daniel came home late, the decision already made. He found Lucy sitting in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book in her hands. The warmth of the lamp cast a golden glow over her, making the moment feel deceptively serene. "We need to talk," he said, his voice feigning hesitation. Lucy looked up, meeting his gaze with mild curiosity. "About what?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair as if this was difficult for him. I think we should separate. We're not happy, Lucy. We both know it. Maybe it's time we go our separate ways." Lucy let the words settle, her expression unreadable. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even look shocked. Instead, she simply stared at him, long enough that Daniel shifted uncomfortably under her gaze, and then she smiled. "If that's what you want, then okay." Daniel blinked. "Okay?" "Yes." She closed her book gently, setting it aside. "I won't fight you on this. If you want a divorce, you'll have it." For the first time that night, Daniel felt something uneasy slither through him. He had expected resistance, anger, heartbreak, maybe even bargaining, but this was too easy. "You're sure?" he asked slowly. "Of course." Lucy stood, walking past him as if the conversation didn't bother her at all. "I just hope you know what you're doing." Daniel watched her disappear into the bedroom, the uneasy feeling settling deeper in his gut. But Hannah had assured him that Lucy was just being strong, that she would break later, that the settlement would be worked out, and he would walk away with what he deserved. He forced himself to believe it. The next day he began making preparations. He reached out to a lawyer ready to initiate the divorce proceedings. He asked about financial entitlements, confident that his years of marriage entitled him to a significant payout. And that's when everything fell apart. His lawyer frowned as he scanned through the financial documents. "Daniel, there's a problem." "What do you mean?" The lawyer looked up, brows furrowing. "Lucy has already moved all of her assets. The company, the properties, the accounts, they're legally tied up in a way that you have no claim over them." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "That's not possible. I'm her husband." "You were." The lawyer sighed. "But from a legal standpoint, you get nothing." It took a moment for the words to register. Nothing. Daniel's mouth went dry. His mind raced. He had planned everything around getting his share of Lucy's fortune, believing that no matter what happened, he would walk away financially secure. But she had been ahead of him all along. Somewhere deep in his gut he knew. Lucy had known, and she had let him walk straight into his own downfall. Panic started to creep in, but he couldn't let Hannah know. If she found out he wasn't getting anything from the divorce, she might turn on him. She wanted wealth, status, a man with power. If he had nothing, what would keep her by his side? So he said nothing. That night, Lucy sat in their home sipping wine, watching the city lights twinkle beyond the window. She could feel it, the shift in energy, the first whispers of unraveling. Daniel was spiraling. And she? She was just getting started. Lucy had been waiting for this moment. She had watched Daniel and Hannah bask in their arrogance, believing they had her fooled. She had let them grow comfortable in their deception, let them revel in their delusions of victory. But tonight, the game was ending, and she was going to make sure they never forgot it. It was their wedding anniversary, though Daniel hadn't so much as acknowledged it. That morning she had casually mentioned dinner plans, watching as he barely hid his impatience. "I have a late business meeting," he had lied effortlessly. "Don't wait up." Lucy had smiled, nodding as if she believed him. But the moment he walked out the door, her phone buzzed with a message from the private investigator. He booked a table at the Grand Royale. He's on his way there now, with her. Of course he was. Lucy had already made her reservations. By the time Daniel and Hannah arrived at the elegant restaurant, Lucy was already seated, perfectly composed, a glass of wine in hand. The setting was exquisite. Low candlelight, soft music, couples whispering over gourmet meals. Everything about the night exuded romance. And Lucy was about to turn it into a public spectacle neither of them would ever recover from. She didn't rush things. Instead, she watched them from across the room, calm and patient. Daniel led Hannah to their table, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. They looked at each other with anticipation, believing they were about to celebrate the beginning of their new life together. They were so wrapped up in their fantasy that they didn't even see her. Not yet. Lucy swirled her wine, savoring the moment. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't fate. It was a perfectly orchestrated trap, and now it was time to spring it. As Daniel settled into his seat, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a crisp envelope. He slid it across the table toward Hannah, his smirk full of triumph. "It's done," he murmured, satisfaction dripping from his voice. "I spoke to her. She didn't fight me on it. The divorce will be final soon." Hannah beamed, reaching for his hand. "You're finally free." A voice interrupted them. "Wow, what a romantic evening." The two of them froze. Daniel's head snapped up, his entire body going rigid as his eyes locked onto Lucy, seated just a few tables away. She was watching them with amused indifference, sipping her wine as if she were simply enjoying the atmosphere. Hannah's face drained of color. "Oh, don't stop on my account," Lucy continued, rising from her seat. She strolled toward them, her heels clicking against the polished floor, every step measured and deliberate. Daniel's lips parted, but no words came out. Lucy stopped at their table, glancing down at the envelope between them. "Let me guess," she said smoothly. "That's my wedding anniversary gift? How thoughtful, Daniel." Hannah shifted uncomfortably, her grip tightening around the edge of the table. "Lucy," Daniel began, his voice unsteady. But before he could say another word, the lights dimmed slightly. A moment later, a large screen at the front of the restaurant flickered to life. And then, the truth began to play. Gasps rippled through the restaurant as footage appeared. Grainy security camera clips of Daniel and Hannah sneaking into a hotel together, embracing in the dim glow of a parking lot, whispering to each other in what they thought were private moments. Then the text messages, the damning conversations. "I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Just a little longer. Once she signs, I'll be free, and we'll have everything. Lucy has no idea. She still thinks I'm the perfect husband." But then, the final blow. A second recording, one Daniel hadn't expected. Hannah in another conversation, this time with someone else. "Daniel is just a means to an end," she said, her voice dripping with calculation. "Once he gets what I want from Lucy, he's useless to me." The restaurant fell into a stunned silence. Daniel turned to Hannah, his face stricken. What the hell is this?" Hannah's eyes darted around, panic setting in. I don't know, this isn't—" Lucy tilted her head, feigning concern. "Oh, Daniel," she murmured, "you didn't really think she loved you, did you?" Hannah's mouth opened and closed, searching for an escape, but there was none. And Lucy wasn't done. She turned to the now speechless crowd, offering them a small, amused smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's special feature. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe my anniversary dinner is over." She reached for her clutch, threw a few bills onto the table because, unlike them, she always paid her dues, and walked away. Daniel and Hannah were left sitting there, exposed, humiliated, ruined. By the time Lucy stepped outside, the sound of whispers and murmurs trailed behind her. The scandal was already spreading like wildfire, and she didn't look back. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. The video had ended, but the aftermath was only beginning. Every pair of eyes was locked onto the shattered remains of Daniel and Hannah, their betrayal laid bare for all to see. The soft hum of whispered conversations quickly turned into loud murmurs, judgmental stares piercing through them like daggers. Daniel sat frozen in place, his face drained of color, his fingers gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He blinked rapidly, his mind struggling to process the reality that had just unfolded before him. He had been so sure of his victory, so sure that he had played the perfect game, and yet he had lost everything. Hannah wasn't faring any better. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her nails digging into the tablecloth as if she could claw her way out of the nightmare she found herself trapped in. She turned to Daniel, eyes wide with desperation, but he couldn't even look at her. And then, before they had a chance to react, a new presence entered the scene. The doors of the restaurant swung open, and a group of sharply dressed individuals strode in with purpose. The sound of their polished shoes clicking against the marble floor sent a ripple of unease through the room. These were not just random guests. These were professionals, lawyers, Lucy's lawyers. One of them, a tall man with a commanding presence, stopped beside Daniel's table and placed a thick folder in front of him. His voice was calm, authoritative, lethal. "Mr. Daniel, I'm here to formally notify you that the legal documents you signed several weeks ago have now been activated." Daniel's eyes flickered with confusion. His hands trembled as he reached for the folder, flipping it open. He skimmed through the papers, his breathing growing erratic with every word he read. And then, the realization hit him like a freight train. "No, this can't be right," he whispered, his voice cracking. His fingers gripped the document so tightly that the edges began to crumple. "This isn't possible." But it was. Because what he held in his hands was a legally binding contract, one that he had signed himself without reading the fine print, the contract that stripped him of every single financial entitlement he thought he had. Lucy's voice, smooth as silk, cut through the tension. "Oh, but it is." Daniel looked up at her, his face contorted with disbelief, his entire world crashing down around him. "You tricked me," he hissed, his jaw clenching. "You set me up." Lucy tilted her head, her expression almost pitying. "I didn't trick you, Daniel. I simply gave you the opportunity to betray me the way you wanted to. You just weren't smart enough to check what you were signing." The weight of her words pressed down on him like an iron fist. He had been so blinded by greed, so eager to secure his future without Lucy, that he had walked straight into her trap. His bank accounts were no longer linked to the company. His shares, nullified. His assets, locked away in a trust beyond his reach. He had nothing. Daniel's fingers curled into fists, his face a mask of pure rage and humiliation. And then another folder was dropped onto the table, this time in front of Hannah. The second lawyer, a poised woman with a sharp gaze, spoke, her voice firm. "Miss Hannah, we have gathered substantial evidence regarding financial misconduct under your name. You have been funneling company funds for personal expenses, which includes, but is not limited to, unauthorized withdrawals, luxury purchases, and fraudulent expense claims." Hannah's face turned deathly pale. That's a lie," she sputtered, her hands shaking as she reached for the documents, scanning them with growing horror. Receipts, bank transfers, statements. Everything was there, everything proving that she had stolen from the very company she had hoped to take over. Her head snapped toward Daniel, panic setting in. "Do something!" But Daniel didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply stared at her with a hollow expression, as if seeing her for the first time. Lucy watched them both, her lips curving into a slow, satisfied smile. "What's wrong, Hannah? I thought you always said I was lucky to have a man like Daniel." "And Daniel? Wasn't she supposed to be the one who truly appreciated you?" Hannah's eyes darted between Lucy and Daniel, her breath ragged. "Daniel, tell them this isn't true. Tell them—" But Daniel didn't say a word. Because for the first time he saw it. Hannah wasn't looking at him with love. She was looking at him with expectation, with desperation, not because she cared, because she needed him to fix this. And in that moment, Daniel finally realized what Lucy had known all along. He wasn't Hannah's partner. He was her pawn. And now that he had nothing to offer her, she had no use for him anymore. A sharp laugh escaped Lucy's lips, and she slowly rose from her seat, adjusting the sleek bracelet on her wrist. "Well," she said, picking up her clutch, "this has been entertaining, but I think I've seen enough." She turned to leave, but then, as if remembering something, she looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Hannah, I'd get a good lawyer if I were you. I've already forwarded all of this to the authorities. Embezzlement is a nasty charge to beat." Hannah let out a strangled noise, her world spinning. "Lucy, please." But Lucy didn't spare her another glance, and with that she walked out of the restaurant, her heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving Daniel and Hannah drowning in the ruins of their own betrayal. By morning, the scandal had gone viral. Clips from the restaurant were everywhere, on news channels, gossip sites, business forums, and every social media platform imaginable. The internet had turned Daniel and Hannah into the ultimate cautionary tale. The betrayed wife who took down a cheat and his mistress. A single dinner that ended a career. The fall of Daniel and the woman who thought she could win. The comments were brutal. "Imagine ruining your whole life just to be exposed like this in 4K. He really thought he was going to win? LMAO. She played them both like a grandmaster, absolutely legendary." Lucy barely had to lift a finger. The world had already decided that Daniel and Hannah deserved their fate. It didn't take long for the professional consequences to follow. Every business partner Daniel had ever worked with wanted nothing to do with him. Calls were ignored, emails went unanswered. Investors pulled their support and pending deals vanished overnight. No company wanted to be associated with him, not when his name was now synonymous with deceit and incompetence. Meanwhile, Hannah's fate wasn't much better. The company she had once dreamed of controlling blacklisted her immediately. No one was willing to hire a woman caught stealing from her own employer. Her name was tainted beyond repair. And the worst part? Neither of them had seen the final blow coming. 3 days after the scandal erupted, Daniel showed up at Lucy's company. He looked nothing like the man who had once walked into boardrooms with effortless arrogance. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his posture slumped in defeat. He had lost everything: his career, his credibility, his so-called love. Security hesitated when he begged to see Lucy, but she allowed it. She wasn't afraid of him. When she stepped outside, Daniel dropped to his knees. "Lucy, please," he choked out. "I was stupid. I was selfish. I let greed ruin me, but I swear I—" He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I have nothing left. Please, just give me a chance." Lucy stared down at him, unfazed. "A chance?" she repeated, arching an eyebrow. "A chance for what, Daniel? To betray me again? To take more than you already have?" He shook his head desperately. "No, I swear you just realized that without me you're nothing." Silence stretched between them. Daniel had no argument, no excuse, no justification, because she was right. Lucy let out a small laugh, cold, unforgiving. "When you walked out on our marriage, you threw away every chance you had. You thought you could replace me with someone weaker, someone easier to manipulate, and look where that got you." She leaned in slightly, her voice lowering just enough that only he could hear. "You were never going to win against me, Daniel. You just didn't know it yet." And then she walked away. She didn't turn back. She didn't acknowledge the way his shoulders slumped further, or how the last bit of hope drained from his eyes. She left him kneeling there like the failure he had become. Meanwhile, Hannah was spiraling. She had burned every bridge, exhausted every connection. No one wanted to help her. No one wanted to risk association with a woman who had been publicly disgraced. She had tried calling Daniel, but he had ignored her. She had tried seeking out the man she had been secretly seeing behind Daniel's back, only to find that he had already moved on, unwilling to involve himself with her now that she was ruined. Desperate, she reached out to high-profile attorneys, hoping to fight the embezzlement charges. "There has to be a way out of this," she pleaded during a consultation. The lawyer sighed, adjusting his glasses. "The evidence is airtight, Miss Hannah. You knowingly stole company funds. Your best option is to cooperate with authorities and hope for a reduced sentence." Her stomach twisted. "A sentence? You mean prison? If convicted?" "Absolutely." She staggered out of the office, her world crumbling around her. For the first time, she truly understood what she had done. She had lost. She had nothing, no money, no career, no reputation, and no one left who cared. By the end of the week, both Daniel and Hannah had vanished from the public eye. Daniel packed what little he had left and left the city, too humiliated to face the whispers and stares. He had no job, no allies, no future. Hannah disappeared entirely. Whether she had run or was simply waiting for the inevitable legal consequences, no one knew. Their grand plans had crumbled into dust. Their betrayal had led them straight into their own destruction. And Lucy? She didn't look back. Lucy walked away from her past without looking back. There was no lingering sadness, no second-guessing. The chapter of her life that had once been filled with love, betrayal, and deception was officially closed, and she was the one who had sealed it shut. She had once loved Daniel. She had once trusted Hannah. But in the end, the only person who had truly protected her was herself. Now she was finally free. For the first time in years, she didn't have to force a smile for a man who never deserved her. She didn't have to suppress her instincts, wondering if the people closest to her were plotting behind her back. She didn't have to pretend anymore. And the weight that had once sat so heavily on her shoulders, it was gone. Lucy threw herself into her work, pouring her focus and energy into expanding her business. She had already built a thriving empire, but now, without distractions, she was unstoppable. 2 new locations opened within months, making her spa brand a household name in the industry. Investors clamored to work with her, drawn by her resilience and sharp business acumen. The press adored her. Articles hailed her as a phoenix rising from the ashes, a woman who had turned the ruins of betrayal into a foundation for something greater. Customers admired her. Women from all walks of life saw her as a symbol of strength, of self-worth, of the kind of power that came from standing tall after being knocked down. And her employees? They respected her more than ever. The toxic presence that had once lingered in her company was gone. No more Daniel with his entitled arrogance. No more Hannah with her conniving schemes. What remained was a thriving, positive workplace filled with people who truly valued their work and the woman who led them. Lucy had won. Daniel, on the other hand, had lost everything. The man who had once stood beside her in luxury now found himself scraping by in obscurity. No company would touch him. No investor would trust him. He had become a walking cautionary tale, a lesson in greed, stupidity, and the consequences of underestimating the wrong woman. Opportunities dried up overnight. He tried calling old connections, but they ignored him. Some outright laughed in his face. With no options left, Daniel had to take whatever work he could find. Once accustomed to high-end business meetings and first-class flights, he now found himself doing menial jobs, barely making ends meet. The world had moved on from him. Lucy had moved on from him, and no one cared where he ended up. Hannah suffered a fate just as humiliating. Her court case dragged on, exposing every shady transaction, every stolen dollar, every desperate attempt to claw her way into wealth and status. Though she avoided prison, the damage was irreversible. No employer would take her. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who had stolen, lied, and still lost everything in the end. The backlash never faded. Even as months passed, social media never forgot her. The internet had permanently labeled her as a fraud, a gold digger, a snake who had played the game and failed miserably. Desperate and alone, she left the city, disappearing into the shadows, never to be heard from again. One evening, as Lucy sat in her penthouse, a message appeared on her phone. It was from an unknown number, but she knew exactly who it was. "Lucy, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I lost everything, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I hope you're happy. Daniel." She stared at the message for a moment, then placed her phone down without responding. He was right about one thing: she was happy. Because for the first time in a long time, her life was finally her own. And the past? It was nothing more than a lesson she had already learned. A year had passed, and Lucy was no longer the woman she used to be. She had shed the remnants of her past like an old skin, stepping fully into the woman she was meant to become. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the pain, it no longer held weight in her life. Instead, she had rebuilt herself, stronger and more powerful than ever. Her business had flourished beyond what even she had imagined. With new locations in multiple major cities, her spa empire had become one of the most sought-after luxury brands in the industry. Investors lined up, eager to work with the woman whose name had become synonymous with strength, resilience, and unshakable power. More than that, Lucy had found joy in simply living. She traveled, explored new opportunities, met new people. She was in no rush to fall in love again, but she also hadn't locked herself away. She had learned that love, real love, wasn't something that needed to be tested or fought for. It was something that simply was, something that felt effortless when it was right. And one day, at a high-profile business event, she met Mark. At first, he was just another handshake, another introduction. But as they spoke, she noticed something different about him. He wasn't like the men she had known before. He was successful, yes, but he didn't wear his success like armor. He was confident, but not arrogant. Intelligent, but not condescending. And above all, he listened. Mark wasn't just interested in what she had built. He was interested in her. Their conversations stretched beyond business, dipping into life, family, dreams, and regrets. He had a warmth to him, an ease that made her feel like she could breathe, like she didn't have to measure her words or hold herself back. They started as friends. But somewhere between late-night conversations and unexpected laughter, Lucy realized something. Mark was everything Daniel had never been. He didn't feel the need to prove himself to her. He didn't compete with her success or try to diminish it. Instead, he admired it, encouraged it, stood beside her, not in front of her. Unlike Daniel, who had always used busyness as an excuse, Mark understood balance. He ran a thriving business, yet still found time to cook dinner, to sit down and talk, to be present. He didn't just value his career, he valued the moments in between. Lucy had spent so many years in a marriage where she had felt alone, despite having a husband. With Mark, she felt seen. One evening, as they sat across from each other at a quiet, intimate restaurant, Mark reached for her hand. "I don't want to rush you," he said softly, "but I want you to know that whenever you're ready, I'm here. No games, no doubts." For the first time in a long time, Lucy felt safe. She squeezed his hand gently, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I think I'm ready." Somewhere across the city, Daniel sat alone. He hadn't seen Lucy in months, not since that humiliating day when he had knelt before her, begging for a second chance. But tonight, as he walked past a restaurant, his feet froze in place. Through the large glass windows, he saw her. She was laughing, a real, genuine laugh, the kind he hadn't seen in years, the kind she had never given him in those last days of their marriage. And across from her, holding her hand, was a man Daniel had never seen before. A stranger. A replacement. A man who now had the life Daniel had thrown away. For the first time, Daniel truly understood what he had lost, and it burned. He had thought he could trade Lucy for something better. He had thought he was making the smarter choice. But now, standing there, watching her look at someone else the way she had once looked at him, he realized the brutal truth. Lucy had never been the problem. He had. And now he would spend the rest of his life knowing that he had once held something extraordinary, something rare, something real, only to let it slip through his fingers. But Lucy never saw him. She was too busy looking forward, too busy embracing the happiness she had found. Because love, she had learned, wasn't about fighting to be chosen. It was about choosing someone who never made you feel like you had to fight for them in the first place. And with Mark, she had finally found exactly that. There comes a time when the past loses its grip, when pain turns into wisdom, and when letting go is not a loss but a triumph. Betrayal may leave wounds, but those wounds shape resilience, reminding us that true strength isn't in seeking revenge, it's in rising above. In the end, the best closure isn't in proving anything to those who wronged us, but in living well, thriving beyond their reach. Love should never be a battle for validation. It should be given freely, without fear or doubt. The right person will never make you question your worth or force you to compete for their affection. And when the wrong ones leave, they open doors to something far greater, something built on trust, respect, and mutual devotion. Life has a way of balancing itself. Deception and greed may seem victorious for a time, but they always collapse under their own weight. Meanwhile, those who choose truth and self-respect will always find their way forward, stronger than before. What are your thoughts on this journey? Have you ever faced a moment that redefined your path? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more. Your support means everything. And together, we'll continue sharing stories that inspire, empower, and remind us of the strength we all carry within.